What happens when a CEO puts on a janitor's uniform and discovers his company isn't just dirty on the floors? Zeke Franklin had built the business back up from the ground after buying it a decade ago. 13 locations now across the state, most of them doing well. But lately, the 12th location, an old warehouse-turned-distribution hub in Riverside, kept showing up in his reports with odd numbers. High inventory costs, low worker retention, and more refund claims than any other site. He'd asked the district manager and all he got was a vague, "Riverside just has higher turnover. It's tough to find good people out there." Zeke didn't like guessing. He wanted to see it for himself. So he shaved the beard he'd had for years, dyed his salt and pepper hair dark brown, ditched his usual blazer for a blue jumpsuit, and put on thick framed glasses. He'd never met the staff at Riverside personally. Most hires were done locally. Every warehouse had its own manager and crew. That's how he'd set it up to keep things lean. No photos of him hung in the break rooms, and in the corporate system, he made sure to enter as James Fulton, a new part-time maintenance trainee sent from a third-party cleaning contractor. He parked his old Honda 2 blocks down and walked in through the back entrance. The first person he met was a young woman with reddish curls pulled tight into a bun, rolling a cart of cleaning supplies. "You the new guy?" she asked, wiping her forehead with a sleeve. "You're late." "Yeah, sorry." "Got the wrong exit," Zeke said, adjusting his voice slightly. She handed him a mop. "Name's Keeley. I'll show you the ropes. You clean floors, bathrooms, and whatever else they yell about. Don't ask questions." "Sounds fair." Keeley led him through a maze of gray aisles stacked high with boxes. There was an eerie silence between the workers. Heads down. No chatting. No music. Just the hum of forklifts and the occasional bark from above. That's when Zeke first saw the supervisor, a man in his early 40s wearing a pressed shirt and loafers too clean for warehouse work. He was leaning over a clipboard, chewing gum and pointing at a stock clerk who looked barely out of high school. "Wrong bin again." "That's the third time this week, Jesse," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You want hours next week or not?" Jesse mumbled something and walked off, red-faced. Zeke turned to Keeley. "Who's that?" "Supervisor, Darren. Don't get in his way." "Bad boss," Keeley shrugged. "He's got favorites, the ones who stay quiet and do what he says." They moved on. The bathrooms were worse than Zeke expected, never cleaned right, paper supplies missing, and a horrible smell he couldn't place. "How long's it been like this?" he asked. Keeley sighed. "We don't have enough staff. They cut hours last month and now it's just me and you for cleaning." Zeke frowned. "But there were 2 full-time janitors on payroll here last I checked." "Yeah, well, not anymore." She paused, then added, "Don't ask too many questions. This place has ears." Later, during lunch, Zeke sat outside eating a sandwich when he noticed Darren stepping into a black SUV with tinted windows. A guy in a polo handed him a clipboard and Darren signed it fast, then shoved it back. The SUV drove off. Zeke squinted. That SUV had the logo of a cleaning supply company. But it wasn't the one their company used. He made a mental note. Later that day, he scrubbed the same floor 3 times just to stay near the staff and listen. That's when he caught 2 workers whispering near the lockers. Darren said the supply order was lost again. "That's the 3rd time this month. We're out of gloves." "No one's checking. He probably bills corporate and pockets the rest." Zeke's jaw tightened. He forced himself to keep cleaning. By the end of the shift, he was sore, sweating, and angry. Not just at Darren, at himself. For not seeing it earlier. For losing touch. As the sun dipped low, he stayed behind to wipe down the break room. Keeley walked in, grabbing her coat. "You're not bad for a newbie," she said with a tired smile. "Stick around. You might survive." He looked at her, really looked. Her hands were cracked, her shoes were worn through, but she never complained once. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Not yet." She gave him a nod before heading out. Alone, Zeke sat down, pulled out a small notebook from his pocket and wrote down 3 things. Missing supply funds, misuse of vendor partnerships, staff working in unsafe conditions. He closed the book. Tomorrow, he'd dig deeper. By the second morning, Zeke arrived early before the sun crept over the warehouse roof. The air was thick with dew and diesel. He waited by the loading dock, watching how the morning shift kicked off. Trucks rolled in behind schedule, and the receiving crew scrambled without so much as a clipboard or clear instruction. No supervisor in sight. Keely showed up 10 minutes later, rubbing her temples. "You all right?" Zeke asked, pretending to check the mop closet. "Didn't sleep much." "I had to cover for the night janitor again. He quit 2 days ago. No replacement yet." Zeke nodded once and kept his eyes on the dock. A pallet jack jammed midway off a truck ramp, and 2 younger workers argued over whether they had the right manifest. Keely followed his gaze. "Happens all the time. Nobody knows who's running what. Darren doesn't show up until 10, sometimes later." Zeke didn't answer. Instead, he walked through the sorting area, mop in hand, but his focus was elsewhere. The shift manager, a wiry guy with a Bluetooth earpiece, walked past him without acknowledging anyone. He barked orders into the air, mostly ignored. Zeke turned a corner and found Jesse, the kid Darren had berated the day before, kneeling near a broken crate, trying to sweep up spilled inventory with a bent dustpan. No gloves, just bare hands and a look like he hadn't slept in a week. "Need help?" Zeke asked. Jesse looked up. "Won't matter. Darren'll say I broke it even if I didn't." "Was it already like that when you got here?" Jesse hesitated. "Yeah, I told Armen, the dock lead, but he told me to just clean it and move on." Zeke crouched down beside him. "What's your role supposed to be?" "Inventory control." "But I end up doing cleanup half the time." Zeke stood and scanned the shelves. There were barcodes missing from at least 4 pallets, no labels, no logging tablets in sight. He moved to the maintenance cage later, where extra gear and old tools were kept. The lock was broken. Inside, cleaning chemicals were stacked next to open electrical panels, violating every safety code he'd ever signed off on. He was still staring at the mess when a voice behind him said, "You're just the cleaner. That cage is off limits." Zeke turned slowly. Darren stood there with a coffee in hand, pressed shirt unbuttoned at the collar. "You're late," Zeke said evenly. Darren blinked. "Excuse me," Zeke shrugged. "I thought you were the guy in charge. Looks like the whole place has been on autopilot since 6. Darren stepped closer. "You got jokes. You're the new janitor, right? Maybe stick to mops instead of offering critiques." Zeke said nothing. Darren's pupils twitched briefly before he turned and walked off. At lunch, Zeke found a quiet corner behind a storage rack. He used his phone's camera to record the maintenance cage. He captured the chemical violations, the broken lock, and the unsecured fuse box. An hour later, he caught sight of the same black SUV from the day before. This time it parked at the side entrance, out of view of the main cameras. Zeke grabbed a bin of trash and followed, pretending to take it out. From behind the dumpster, he watched Darren meet the same man with the logoed polo. Darren handed over a folded envelope. The other man gave him a clipboard, just like yesterday. They didn't speak a word. Zeke clicked a photo just as the SUV door closed. That night, he stayed late again. Keely returned from the locker room to grab her lunchbox and found him scrubbing a wall that didn't need it. "You don't stop, do you?" "I like knowing what's clean," he said without looking up. She leaned against the doorframe. "You ever work in a warehouse before?" "Years ago." "Different life." She watched him for a moment. "You don't act like a cleaner." He glanced up. "What does a cleaner act like?" "I don't know. Most people just try to survive here. You ask questions like you still think things can change." Zeke stood. "Maybe they can." The next morning, Zeke asked the HR rep at headquarters through a direct call using a secure line to pull financial records for Riverside's cleaning vendor. The name on the SUV wasn't the approved partner. Within an hour, it was confirmed. Darren had submitted invoices from a different vendor for the last 3 months at double the normal rate. Headquarters had paid without flagging it. Zeke requested the original vendor be contacted. They hadn't sent a crew to Riverside in over 12 weeks. He went quiet for the rest of the day, observing. The staff walked on eggshells. Jesse got yelled at again for a misfiled item he never touched. Another worker, a woman named Rosa, was forced to skip her break to cover for a missing associate. No one complained. They just moved faster. Silent. That afternoon, Zeke made his way to the break room and found Rosa sitting alone, eating cold rice from a plastic container. He sat across from her. "You all right?" She looked up, surprised. "Yeah, just tired. You've been here a while, 3 years. This is my second warehouse. The last one closed. I stayed because I thought this one had better chances." Zeke studied her face, creased from fatigue, eyes alert despite the exhaustion. "Why not leave?" he asked. "I've got 2 kids, one's got asthma, I can't risk a gap in pay." He nodded. "You ever talk to corporate about what's happening here?" She shook her head. "You think they listen?" That night, Zeke didn't go home. Instead, he drove 2 towns over to meet with the district manager, a man named Curtis, who'd been overseeing Riverside. They met at a diner off the interstate. Curtis looked surprised to see him in person. "I didn't know you were in town," he said cautiously. "I didn't want you to." Curtis shifted in his seat. "Something wrong?" Zeke slid the photos across the table, the vendor's switch, the cash handoff, the broken safety cage. Curtis paled. I didn't know about this. Darren always said." "I'm not interested in what Darren said. I'm interested in how these invoices got through your review." Curtis swallowed hard. "I may have skipped some of the vendor audit checks. It was a busy quarter. We were trying to hit fulfillment targets." Zeke leaned forward. "You were lazy, and that laziness let a guy like Darren treat people however he wanted while skimming off the top." Curtis looked down. "I want Darren suspended by morning." "And you," Zeke stood, tossing a 20 on the table, "are on probation until further notice. If I find one more thing under your watch that doesn't match company policy, you're gone." He walked out without waiting for a reply. At sunrise, Zeke arrived at Riverside in a button-up shirt and slacks. No jumpsuit, no mop. He entered through the front door. Keely was wiping down the lobby counters when she looked up and froze. "You're Zeke Franklin, owner and CEO." She stepped back. I don't understand." "I went undercover to see what was happening here." "You helped me understand more than anyone." Footsteps echoed behind them. Darren appeared halfway through a sentence before he registered the scene. "Hey, I don't know what this guy—" "You're done," Zeke said flatly. Darren's face went blank. "What? You're terminated. For vendor fraud, unsafe work conditions, and employee mistreatment. HR will follow up with paperwork." Darren's jaw flexed. "You can't just—" "I already did." As Darren stormed out, Zeke turned to the staff gathering nearby. Jesse stood near the dock. Rosa emerged from the break room, lunch still in hand. "I owe all of you an apology," Zeke said. "This warehouse was neglected because I stopped paying attention. That ends today." He met Keely's eyes. "You're getting a full team back, overtime pay for the last 2 weeks. And a real maintenance budget." She blinked hard, looking away. Zeke walked through the warehouse slowly, stopping to speak with each employee. No clipboard, no entourage, just watching, listening. He knew this wasn't over. A single visit wouldn't fix the rot that had taken root. But now at least it had a start. The warehouse lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows across the concrete floor as Zeke paced through the main sorting aisle with Rosa at his side. She walked stiffly, still adjusting to the news from the day before. Most staff had returned that morning with hesitant curiosity, unsure of what to expect after Darren's swift removal. The air felt thinner, less oppressive, but uncertain. Zeke stopped near the packing station and turned to Rosa. "Who's been managing this section since Darren was let go?" "Our man Doc Lead has been covering it, but he's barely keeping up with his own side." Zeke nodded once. "Then we need a temporary floor lead, someone who knows this space, knows the people, and doesn't cut corners." She hesitated. "You want me to step in?" "I want someone who's earned the team's trust. If that's you, then yes." Rosa looked down, thumb brushing the corner of her ID badge. "I'll need help, and I'm not trained on the inventory software." "You'll get support. I'll bring in someone from Central Ops for a week. You focus on people and flow." He moved on before she could answer, leaving her standing with a strange mix of pride and pressure. Zeke's next stop was the loading dock. Armand was hunched over a clipboard, cross-referencing pallet barcodes with a handheld scanner. He looked up when Zeke approached but didn't pause his work. "What's the status on outbound today?" "Running behind. We've got 4 trucks still waiting. Half the labels from last night were misprinted." Zeke leaned over the table, scanning the sheets. "Where's the label printer?" Corner of the admin room. "It jams every other batch. Darren never replaced it." "Get the part number, I'll have a new one overnighted." Armand hesitated, then said, "We've got more going wrong than just printers. A lot of these guys are new, barely trained. Some of them were doing stow and pick on day 2. Why weren't they trained properly?" Darren didn't allow it, said it slowed things down, told me to just throw them in and see who stuck. Zeke stepped back, jaw tightening. "That ends now. Pull anyone who isn't certified off powered equipment. Set up a shadowing schedule. You'll get 2 floaters from Central to help train." Armand gave a short nod and went back to his scanner. Zeke turned toward the back office. He found Keely near the break room, leaning over a closed locker with a wrench in one hand and a flashlight tucked under her arm. She looked up as he approached. "Locker jammed. Number 23. Same one that's been busted since before you showed up." He crouched beside her and inspected the latch. "How many lockers are broken?" 5, and the hinges on 2 more are about to go. "Write up a list. I'll get replacements ordered." Keely stood and wiped her hands on her jeans. "You're really trying to fix this, huh?" "I didn't come here to give speeches. This place shouldn't have been allowed to rot like this. You'll need more than new lockers, I know." A voice called from the far end of the hallway. "Excuse me, Mr. Franklin, do you have a moment?" A woman in a gray blazer approached, holding a folder to her chest. Zeke recognized her. Adriana from Internal Audit. He hadn't expected her until the following week. "Adriana, didn't expect you this early. I moved up the visit. After your call yesterday, I pulled the last 3/4 of vendor invoices from Riverside. Something didn't sit right." He gestured for her to follow him to the admin room. Inside, the walls were lined with filing cabinets, some of which were left open, papers spilling out. A desktop computer sat idle on a desk cluttered with broken pens and empty coffee cups. "I already confirmed the vendor change was unauthorized," Zeke said. "What else did you find?" Adriana opened the folder and laid out 3 sheets on the desk. "These are signed expense forms. All filed by Darren. What's strange is they include manual receipts handwritten for things like emergency janitorial parts and forklift battery repairs. Neither matches our approved procurement process, and several have no attached invoices." Zeke scanned the pages. "What's the total amount?" "Just under $62,000, spread across 8 months. Zeke's eyes narrowed. "We're pressing charges. We've forwarded everything to legal. They're drafting a formal report." He nodded once. "Good. Make sure Curtis from District gets a separate copy." Adriana paused. "You want him looped in. He needs to see the ripple effects of ignoring protocol. He'll be at the ops review next week. I want this front and center." She gathered the papers and stepped out. Zeke remained in the room for a moment, staring at the checklist pinned beside the computer. Half the boxes were fake checked. A signature at the bottom read D. Nash. He pulled the sheet down and crumpled it. Movement outside the window caught his eye. Jesse was lifting a box awkwardly, his back bent at an angle that made Zeke wince. He stepped out and called to him. "Hold on, set that down." Jesse froze, then lowered the box slowly. "Where's your back support belt?" Jesse blinked. "No one gave me one." Zeke turned to Armand, who had just come around the corner. "Where are safety belts kept?" Armand looked puzzled. "They used to be in the bin by the dock door. I haven't seen them in weeks." Zeke turned fully. "You didn't report that." "I assumed Darren had them locked up." Zeke's jaw clenched. "From now on, if you see missing safety gear, you report it. Immediately." He motioned for Jesse to follow him. Inside the maintenance cage, behind a stack of unused signage, they found a half-empty bin with dust-covered belts. Zeke handed one to Jesse. This is non-negotiable. You don't lift anything without it. Jesse nodded quickly, strapping it on. Later that afternoon, Zeke gathered the team in the break room. No speech, no announcement, just a printed sheet taped to the wall listing new changes. New label printer arriving next day, safety equipment checks before every shift, training schedule, posted weekly anonymous feedback box, added near time clock, temporary floor, lead assignments under review. Keeley studied the list quietly. You're laying a lot on people fast. They've carried this place without help for too long, now they get support. She folded her arms. What about hiring? We're still short. Zeke nodded. I've authorized 3 new full-time roles. HR will fast-track interviews. You'll be involved in selection. She raised an eyebrow. Me? You've worked here long enough to know who fits. That night, after the shift ended, Zeke stayed behind to update the central systems with new safety protocols. As he entered the last note, he noticed an alert, an old ticket from a worker named Mateo, flagged escalated but never closed out. He opened it. A complaint about being forced to work double shifts without overtime. Dated 5 months back. Closed by Darren with the note. Resolved verbally. Zeke printed it and added it to the folder for legal. In the quiet that followed, he sat back in the creaky office chair, staring at the hum of the warehouse monitors. The place still looked tired, but the silence wasn't laced with dread anymore. It was just quiet. Tomorrow, the new supplies would arrive, training would begin, and for the first time in months, this warehouse would start operating like it was meant to. He powered down the screen and stood up. There was still too much to fix, but now at least the rot had a name. And it was being cut out, piece by piece. By the end of the first week post-reveal, the mood inside the Riverside warehouse had shifted, but Zeke knew better than to mistake that shift for stability. The fear had retreated, but the cracks were still there. The systems were still fragile. The people still tired. He arrived just before opening, this time in work boots and a dark gray polo with his real name stitched above the pocket. Not a suit, not an entourage, just him. Keeley was already in the central aisle, unboxing the new safety harnesses that had arrived late the night before. She looked up only briefly, then went back to organizing the sizes. You heard from HR yet? Zeke asked. Yeah, they're flying in the recruiter tomorrow. Said I'd sit in during interviews. You comfortable with that? I'm not sure yet, she said, not looking up, but I'll do it. Zeke gave a short nod and moved toward the admin area. Inside, Rosa was reviewing the new workflow board on the wall, where color-coded tags now showed shift loads, training status, and task assignments. Half of them still had gaps. She stepped back and tapped the yellow column. I've got 2 pickers coming in late. One has a sick kid. The other's stuck at the clinic. You working around it? I'll shift some of Jesse's lighter loads their way, but we're stretched thin. Zeke crossed his arms. Once the new hires come through, you'll get breathing room. I'll believe it when I see them show up 2 weeks in a row. He cracked a faint grin. Fair. She picked up a clipboard. Also, we've got a vendor visit today, safety compliance. They want to inspect the chemical storage again. I'll walk it with them, Zeke said. They'll want to see leadership involved. She looked him over. You count as leadership in that shirt, barely. By mid-morning, he caught up with Armand near the freight ramp. The new label printer had been installed, but the software wasn't syncing with the handheld scanners. We ran 3 test batches, Armand said, tapping the screen. 2 came out fine, 1 printed with yesterday's date. No idea why. You flagged IT. They're remote this week. Said they'd patch it tonight. Zeke shook his head. That's too slow. Tell Central Ops we need someone on site by tomorrow. You shouldn't be guessing mid-shift. Armand hesitated, then added, also. One of the drivers said he saw Darren outside the fence line last night. Just sitting in his car. Zeke's face hardened. Did he talk to anyone? No, just sat there, drove off when the last truck pulled in. Zeke pulled his phone out. I'll make sure we notify legal. If he comes back, security needs to be alerted immediately. He called headquarters, briefed them, and followed up with the contracted security firm. Within the hour, a guard was stationed at the main gate with a photo of Darren and clear instructions. Near the break room, Jesse was checking off a restock list on a clipboard. He glanced up, then quickly looked away and continued writing. Zeke walked over and leaned next to the vending machine. "You getting what you need now?" "I think so," Jesse said carefully. "Rosa double-checked my batch this morning, said I did it right. You've been consistent. That'll matter when raises get reviewed." "I didn't think we got raises here." "You didn't before. That's changing." Jesse blinked, then gave a small nod and returned to his list. Outside, the safety inspector from the vendor arrived just after 11. She was brisk, middle-aged, and didn't waste time with small talk. Zeke walked her through the maintenance cage, the janitorial storage, and the chemical cabinet now relabeled and locked. She checked each item against her list and made notes without comment. At the end of the walkthrough, she closed her binder. "Last visit, this site was non-compliant in 4 out of 7 categories," she said. "Today, all 7 are in order." Zeke raised an eyebrow. "You surprised?" "I'm used to promises, not follow through." He extended a hand. "Appreciate the confirmation." She shook it firmly. "Keep the training consistent, you'll stay ahead." As she left, Keely appeared in the hallway holding a folded sheet of paper. "Found this in the old janitor's locker, hidden behind the divider." She handed it to him. It was a handwritten list, weeks of supply orders, quantities, and side notes. One line read, "Charge double, send half, Darren gets the diff." A name was scrawled in the corner, M. Beltran. Zeke scanned it. "You recognize that name?" She nodded slowly. "He was the part-time delivery guy, showed up maybe once a week, never talked, disappeared around the same time the cleaning supplies did." Zeke folded the paper. "Legal's going to want this." He sent a photo of the document to the legal department, then called Adriana. She answered on the second ring. "I've got a new name for your report," he said. "M. Beltran, tied to Darren's supply fraud." "I'll dig into it tonight," Adriana replied. "If he's linked to any other sites, we'll know by morning." Zeke hung up and turned back toward the floor. In the afternoon, the recruiter from HQ arrived early. She was young, sharp, and clearly overwhelmed by the quiet tension still lingering on site. Keely met her at the door and led her to the conference room they'd cleared out for interviews. Rosa watched from the catwalk above as the recruiter set up her laptop. "They're not going to take this place seriously if they only see the worst of it," she said. "They'll see the people," Zeke replied. "That's what matters." By 4, 2 interviews were complete. One was a strong candidate, a woman who'd worked in freight before and asked clear questions about workload and training. The other had no experience but showed up early and asked to shadow for a day before committing. Keely stepped out of the room after the second interview and joined Zeke near the loading dock. "I like the first one," she said. "The second might be a good backup." She asked if we do hands-on training or just hand out manuals. "What you tell her?" "That we don't hand out anything. We show people." Zeke nodded. "That's the right answer." As the shift wound down, Rosa posted the next week's schedule. It was still tight, but the gaps were smaller than before. Armand finished his equipment checklist for the first time since Zeke arrived. Jesse asked to stay 10 minutes late to finish a batch correctly. Progress. Not perfection, but real. Zeke gathered the full team in the break room just before closing. The room was quiet, but no one looked down anymore. "I'm not going to give a speech," he said. "You've already heard enough, but I will say this. What happened here isn't just on Darren, it's on me. I built a system that relied too much on distance and not enough on people." Keely leaned against the wall. Rosa folded her arms. Armand stood with his arms at his sides. No one interrupted. "That's changing," Zeke continued. "We've got more hires coming. We're fixing the tools, not just the paperwork. But I need all of you to hold me accountable. If something breaks, say something. If someone's being mistreated, report it. If a process doesn't work, challenge it." He paused, letting that land. "This isn't about saving a warehouse. It's about respecting the people who keep it running." He stepped back. No applause, no banners, just better days, one at a time. Slowly, the staff dispersed. No cheers. No celebration, just a quiet return to their lockers, their bags, their lives. Keely lingered as the others filtered out. "You're not putting your name on the wall, are you?" "No, I'm just going to keep showing up." She gave a slight nod, then followed the others out. Zeke stayed behind and turned off the breakroom light. The warehouse was dark now, but not cold. For the first time in months, it felt like something was being built here. Not inventory, not profits, trust, and he wasn't going to walk away from that.